So how does a white guy know so much about KasiNomics? It goes to where GG Alcock comes from in rural KZN. His dad was a very successful dairy farmer and one day had an epiphany. He was worried about malnutrition in the community in which he lived, and he sold everything and went into the NGO business, if you can call NGOs a business.
Yeah. So I think he had this epiphany, and he really wanted to work with communities. He moved to a place called Msinga, which was the real pit, if you want. It was the poorest place in the country, and we were brought up as young Zulu kids.
How does Mom feel about this? I mean, because quite often that's the sort of decision one person in a relationship can have an epiphany, and not everybody in the family has the same epiphany.
Yeah.
Everybody go along with it?
No, my parents, both of them went along with it. In fact, my mother still lives in a mud hut on the banks of the Tugela. She says she's got no running water, but she says she's got lots because she walks down to the running river of the Tugela. And we grew up like that. You know, my first experience of the retail industry, I guess, was a van called Makakazela, which means to shake and shudder. And Makakazela was this truck that used to drive down the road, kakazelaing as it went along, and you could run out from your hut and run onto the road, and it would come to a stop, and you could buy. This very large lady, Nati Duma, would sell you whatever you wanted, and then they would kakazela off into the distance. And, you know, growing up as Zulu kids, we were very poor, we learned a lot about the lifestyles and the cultures of the society around us, and that's really been the huge advantage going into these Kasi economies.
But it comes from a point of view of fundamental respect for the way people live. Large corporates often will look down on communities and say, there's no market for us there. We sell our washing powder in this format. You take it or you leave it. You see the world fundamentally differently as a result.
Yeah, and I think that this is the mistake many, I wrote about KasiNomics revolutionaries in my book, and all of these revolutionaries had really developed interactions with their customers or their consumers that were reciprocal. You know, there's a concept in Zulu of izandla ziyagezana, which means hands wash each other. And to a large extent, there's this arrogance of power that we will give you what we can supply, not what are the things that you're looking for. You know, what is the package format? What is the, what are these things? There's a group in Nigeria called the Tolerant Group. They built a R1 billion industry in instant noodles. They sell 2.5 billion cases of noodles a year. They made I call it Noodlegeria. They made Nigeria the 5th biggest per capita consumer of noodles on the planet. What did they build it on? They understood that, what did people want? One of the pain points that people have in these communities is fuel, charcoal or firewood or paraffin, whatever. With noodles, you make them instantly, but they also recognize that people wanted something filling. So they had a 200-gram called Hungry Man and a 300-gram pack called a Belly Full. And then they distributed it in partnerships with what they call Mashai ladies, who are these food, very much like our quarters here, but they offered this thing. So it was really about understanding the lifestyles of this environment and how to adapt your product to what people wanted. Then they built this incredible distribution network, only informal, from a lady who's selling from her head to a little bakkie to a bicycle. They have 500,000 points of distribution that they distribute to every week. And they build a loyalty campaign with each one of them. The gogo with the thing on her head.
If you come here, you see lots of Twizzler, you see lots of Kingsley, which are not brands that you normally see in the suburbs, for example. And that suggests somehow these smaller brands have managed to break the stranglehold of Coca-Cola in these markets.
Yeah. So a brand called Kingsley has done incredibly well. It used to be called Ubaba Gasebenzi, which means father doesn't work.
Because it's cheap.
Because it was cheap, and it was a derogatory term for it.
So if you drink that, it's not from a brand presence point of view, you look like a poor person drinking the poor man's drink.
My father's unemployed, that's the only reason we buy this. And it was really derogatory, And now Kingsley has become completely accepted because Coca-Cola stopped distributing to the immigrant traders. They focused on their 1.25 instead of offering a 2 litre, and they had a kind of channel thing that said 1.25 is for spaza shops and poor people, 2 litres you'll get at the forecourt or at the Pick and Pay. And in the process, the 1.25 litres in free fall. I believe that Coke's lost a very large proportion as they now scramble back in. And what Kingsley did is that they basically first serviced the immigrant foreign trader, and they built these depots in the periphery of townships and employed the local Bucky Brigade to be redistributors who would distribute all around.
But this is not new. I mean, SAB was doing that during the era where SAB wasn't allowed to distribute in townships. SAB took its drinks to peripheral areas in townships. People came out with wheelbarrows and took wheelbarrows full of beer, white man's beer if you like, the Castles and the Lions, into townships and broke the stranglehold of attempts at government control.
Yeah, and well, I think the difference is that what's happened is that things are changing incredibly fast in this township environment, and Coke were just not keeping up with that. And they're not the only ones. There's many of these who've actually, I wrote about Chappies. Chappies was destroyed, was this massive brand, was destroyed because there was a complete move away from giving the tabletops and the dispensers and stuff to the hawkers at the taxi rank or in the schoolyard or whatever, as the new people took it out and said it's going to be a formal retail brand, and lost that relationship with the hawker. And now there was suddenly an immigrant guy who didn't know what Chappies was. And the Somali was like, I'll buy whatever's cheapest and sell it to the kids. If they had sustained that relationship, the Somali would have been selling Chappies today.
If they'd read their own little Did You Know, there would have been a Did You Know about that.
There you go.
Number 375 would have been Don't Be a Twit, Don't Lose Your Market. We're talking about markets, the KasiNomics model that GG Alcock has become a specialist in educating corporates about foreigners, about as well. There's a story about Disney that came to South Africa and couldn't understand why kids weren't watching the Cartoon Network when the kids were watching the Cartoon Network. They just didn't call it that. In a moment.